Well, good morning. I'm so glad you're joining us for Advent 1. Can you believe it? We're in the season of Advent. Christmas is just around the corner. Perhaps you're noticing that we still have some fall decorations in the back because the week is short and Thanksgiving is Thursday. I'm recording a bit early this week, so please forgive our colors, but be certain we're in Advent and we've not lost our minds with pumpkins. All right, here we are looking at the passage in Jeremiah. I'll begin by simply saying, Happy New Year. That's right, today is the first Sunday of Advent, and it's the beginning of the church year. But it's not a time of great new beginnings, or resolutions, or recommitments, or doubling down on our efforts. No, it's a time of faithful waiting. It's a time to ask, why are things the way they are? And how are they going to be made right? It's a season in the church calendar when we can, admit that things are not right in this world, not right in ourselves, and they're not right in those we love. But we find our hope in the fact that we can look for rescue outside of ourselves. So let's talk about expectations today. Have you had a lot of expectations this year? What did you expect this year to look like, maybe? What do you expect Christmas season to look like? What do you expect from your spouse or your kids or your siblings or your parents or your employees? What did you expect from yourself? We Americans tend to be optimistic at a fault, so what we expect to happen and what actually happens are usually not the same thing. And that creates great disappointment in many of us. Perhaps you're disappointed today. But what is all this stuff called Advent? Well, that's what Advent's like. It's a time when we wait for unrealized expectations to be made right. You see, in Advent, we live in the tension of how things are and not what we expect. We live in the tension of how things are and how things are supposed to be, but there's tension. In other words, Advent is here to help us see just how much things need to be made right and how much we desperately need Jesus. Perhaps you need help in this area today. I know I sure do. It's hard. It's hard to know how much we need Jesus if we think we have it all together and life is going so very well because of our hard work. But there are others of you who are here today who know just how much you need Jesus, because life for you this year has been very hard, excruciating hard even for some of you, in the loss of a loved one, or in the loss of a job, or the loss of a child. We all are feeling something today. Friends, if that's you, I have some good news. Jesus didn't come to make good people better. Jesus came to raise the dead to new life, just like he did a few weeks ago with Lazarus. He came to start over. Our Old Testament passage this morning on this first Sunday of Advent is all about God's promises to his broken and rebellious people who desperately needed him. The people of Jeremiah is writing to knew all about failed expectations. God had rescued them from Egypt, gave them his law. Do this and live. Oh yes, we'll keep it, they said. He gave them a place to live. And the expectation was they could keep God's law, and by doing so, they would live in the land of bounty and peace. But oh, how those expectations were shattered. For God and for man, both were disappointed because it didn't work. And Stewart says, Jeremiah is writing to the people of Israel, where Jerusalem had been completely devastated in the Babylonian invasion of 587 BC. God's people had been scattered from their homeland, living as conquered people in Babylonian captivity. Their way of life has been completely overturned. Their homes, their schools, their offices, their social clubs, their restaurants, their grocery stores, their malls, all turned upside down. Their sense of security has been violated, and they have no idea if they will live to see another day, much less their homes. Hopes and dreams were dead. An expectation that things will be good had been laid to waste. So this passage was written in the context of great suffering. And here's the deal. It's in that setting that God gave Jeremiah these wonderful words. Listen to them with new ears. Behold, he said, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will fulfill the promise that I made to the house of Israel. What music that must have been to their ears. But this leads to some important questions, doesn't it? Where was God in the midst of the devastation? Where is God in the midst of the devastation you and I experience today? Is God really with us? Is He for us? Does He even like us and love us? Whatever happens to His covenant promise that He made to them years ago, where was He then? All very real questions that left things in a bad shape for God's people. And perhaps you know how they feel. Do you know a thing or two about unmet expectations, or devastation, suffering, and waiting for rescue for yourself, maybe for a loved one? Can you relate? Maybe your home has never been ransacked by Babylonians or barbarians who took you and your children into slavery. But maybe you know a little bit about how they feel. You've experienced a little bit of that in the world around you. And so in this moment, hear what God has to say through His wonderful prophet to the captive people of Israel, and even to you today. He doesn't answer the people's suffering with an action plan for what they can do to get their stuff together and gain victory over their oppressor. No, He simply proclaims God's promise of salvation to His people. I will rescue you is the promise. Our faith is not based on the promise we make to God. Thank heavens for that, right? Our faith is based on God's promise to us. And our faith is based on the fact that God is not just a promise maker, He's a promise keeper. Here is what He promised. Verse 15, in those days, He said, and at that time I will cause a righteous branch to spring up out of David, and he shall execute justice and righteousness in the land. Oh, friends, Jesus is that righteous branch that came from the line of David, and He came to redeem us, and He will come to make all things right in this world. You see, God meets us with love, and He promises us in the midst of destruction and of our lives. He meets us in the unexpected ways Himself. We have a God who rescued us not through His own mighty power and violence, but by giving up power, by dying for us, as we talked about last week. And He applies those promises to us even now through unexpected ways, through bread and wine and water, and even His word preached by a fool like me today. He will come to make the unjust things in the world just. He will come to make all the things that are wrong in the world and in you right again. He will come to make all sad things come untrue. Verse 16, in those days, Judea will be saved, and Jerusalem will dwell securely. And in this, the name by which it will be called, the Lord is our righteousness. This was spoken to the people in a city that had no righteousness. They were in ruins, and God comes to them, and He told them that He is their righteousness. He is their imputation. He's their substitution. Oh, friends, don't you look forward to the day when salvation and security dwells in the land and in our own hearts? Isn't that what all this is about? Isn't that what we want? What we think is to be right? We want peace. And He has come. And He is coming to make all things right, you see. Confidence in God's righteousness helps us believe in the new reality that He has prepared for us. You see, ultimately, how do we know God's promise is real? Oh, Jesus. Jesus is how we know. The sign of this covenant promise is the righteous branch of David. Jesus came to us. He lived for us. He bled and died for us. He rose again, defeating death and hell forever, ascended to heaven and sits at the right hand of the Father for us. And He's coming back again to make all things new. Even me, even you. He came to raise you up, to trust in Him. So what are His promises? What are they for you today? On this Advent one, God says, I am going to bring them recovery and healing. I will heal them and reveal to them abundance of prosperity and security. I will restore them and rebuild them as they were at first. I will cleanse them from all the guilt of their sin against me, and I will forgive all the guilt of their sin and rebellion against me. In this city shall be to me the name of joy. Jesus says, come to me. Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. He says, take my yoke upon you. Learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your soul. For my yoke is easy, my burden, well, it's quite light. Jesus says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Jesus says, nothing will snatch them out of my hands. What are the promises of Jesus? Well, here it is. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be His people, and God Himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain any more, for the former things have passed away. And He who has seated on the throne said, behold, I'm making all things new. All things new, all forgiven, and all things new. Also He said, and He said, write this down actually, for these words are trustworthy and true. And He said to me, it is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give the spring of water of life without payment. Friends, in the midst of destroyed expectations, God's promises are secure. The only question left to answer today is, will you wait with me and believe that all is forgiven and all things are new, even you, even me? Amen.